So, fun fact. Not having enough sex can put you at risk of anxiety, paranoia, and depression. Whatever it is that you do with that information is entirely up to you. All I know is I've shown you one way to avoid anxiety, paranoia, and depression. Anyways, let's start this podcast.
Get ready for the battle of the sexes.
Honestly, if this isn't science telling us that booty calls are a good thing, then I don't know what it is that they are trying to tell us. Anyways, it's about time we start this. Welcome to Break Time on West Side, your number one break time podcast, coming to you from Nairobi, Kenya. The man on the mic is a man who is not only tall, dark, and mildly handsome. He is a man that has been going to Google and has found very, very interesting things on the image section. He is a man that exists on the internet to criticize the internet. It is none other than I, Sir Denver B. The show is Battle of the Sexes, your weekly love, sex, and relationship topic type show where we go in deep, we challenge topics hard, and we don't stop until the job is done. And I don't care how wrong that sounds, I'm just gonna keep it in, I'm not gonna edit that shit out. So today's topic is pretty interesting considering that it has been pretty polarizing for a lot of people over the past 2-3 weeks, and it was something that I was requested to talk about, and I also did agree to talk about it at a slightly earlier time. Now, before I get into the topic though, we need to discuss Google for a little bit. So last week, people started discovering something very, very interesting with Google searches, especially on the images. And there was this whole thing of, I don't know, don't Google grandma naked or something. And then, people would see all sorts of very, very nasty shit. Trust me, I tried looking and I was sort of scarred for life. And then after the whole grandma thing, it sort of moved to a slightly more racist side of things. So I don't know who it is that went and said, go Google, I think, black doctor or something. And then it just showed pictures of white doctors. And there was this huge uproar on Twitter, at least. And people were going off on it, busy complaining that, there's a problem with Google. Now, what happened was the black internet, not to be confused with the dark internet, but, the Negro side of the internet, decided to do something about it. Or maybe it was just a bunch of people on Google. They went and they ruined all those searches for white people and then made sure that all you had was black, or more or less just faces and pictures of colored people in white professions when you Googled them and did an image search. So that's what ended up happening. It was pretty interesting knowing that, sometimes you can flip the tables. Maybe it was Anonymous that decided to help us out a little bit. Maybe it's Google's SEOs that can be toyed around with and its algorithms can be played with. But it was pretty refreshing knowing that, black people can get back at the whole white mantra of, you can't have a black person in a profession and shit. But anyways, that being said, pretty interesting topic, and we should probably move on to the more interesting one of today. Now, about 2-3 weeks ago, depending on where you got it, there was a video that sort of caused a bit of a stir online. And it wasn't just on Twitter, it was on Instagram, it was on Facebook, hell, even on WhatsApp as well, if you're in some of those WhatsApp groups where they discuss a lot of these things. And it featured this guy who had surprised his girlfriend on her birthday and had given her this huge, package where she was to sort of just find out what was inside. There was like flowers and everything. So she goes down one package, and then there was like a smaller box, and then a smaller box, and then a smaller box. Then she found an envelope. And once she pulled the envelope and she was told to check out what it was the results of a paternity test that the boyfriend had done for their 3-year-old daughter. Now, as per the paternity test, he wasn't the father. And as usual, we know how DNA tests work. They're usually wrong 0.01% of the time. So they're pretty right, if anything. So while Shorty is busy saying that no, she's your daughter, blah, 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 busy trying to refute the whole story, Mans came out and said that she had till the end of the month to leave the house. And it caused a stir online because on one side, there was guys that were busy saying, you know what, it's good he did that, it's good that he kicked out, you can't be playing us like this. And on the other side, there was the women that were saying that he was being too cruel and it was inhumane for him to do that. And frankly, for me, if you're being given like a month or at least a couple of days to move out, I think it's pretty well deserved. That's probably as nice as I'd probably put it. But at the same time, there were other guys that had popped out with a slightly different angle on things, and they were like, you know what, I'd probably not chase her out and would just choose to live with a kid. And some of them are called simps. So I figured that, considering that this is a problem that mainly affects guys, not that we don't consider what ladies say, but this is something that seems to be affecting guys primarily, and considering that this is a male-centric podcast, I would discuss this situation in its entirety and sort of just try and give sort of both sides and why they're right and wrong. And by both sides this time, I mean both sides in the sense that one who would say, you know what, I'd kick her out, another one who would say I'd stay with her for the sake of the baby, and at the end of it, I will give you guys my updated final verdict, because when I started off seeing this story, hearing about this story, I already picked a side very, very quickly. So that being said, I will sort of get into it. But before I do have to mention one thing. I honestly feel as though this video was staged, and that's mainly because when I found the account of the so-called girlfriend, she actually does make videos online, so it does kind of make it look like it might have been a fake video, or at least it was a staged video. But either way, it relates to something that actually does happen to a lot of guys in real life. So anyways, let me get into both sides and then my side of it. So for guys who responded to this whole dilemma, I don't know how the fuck people say it, it sort of went as one of either two sides. There was one side that said, you know what, I'll kick her out, and there's another side that said I'd stay with her, say for the sake of the kid. Now for me, at the beginning, I was straight up and I was like, you know what, I'd kick her out. Hell, I wouldn't even give her till the end of the month. I'd probably tell her that by the end of the following day I don't want her in my house or anything, let her go back to the nigga that she smashed and shit, and so on and so forth. That's how I was super harsh. I went in on it just like that. But then I listened to the other side busy talking about how, as a father, as someone who's taken up that child as your own from birth all the way till like 2-3 years, there has to be that bond, there has to be that connection. Are you ready to sever that connection simply because you're pissed off that the woman cheated on you? And then that sort of gave me a chance to rethink things. But anyways, now on to the sides. So firstly, the people that went in and were like, you know what, I'd dump her, I'd kick her out, I'd kick both her and the baby out, there's a reason why they're right. Like, it's justified. It's something that has happened time and time again. The idea of paternity fraud, which is what this is something that has happened so much, and it's almost on the rise. If I can say that. I haven't checked into any statistics whether this thing is something that goes up or if it's been going down, but I'm hearing about it more and more. And this was something that I'd hear about from as far back as when I was in high school on like the newspapers and shit. So I do look at it as, you know, we can't continue allowing such shit to happen, and because this thing needs to come to an end, we might as well just start kicking them out, right? Because I looked at it like this: I'm not about to start paying school fees for a kid that isn't mine. I'm not about to start feeding and clothing and caring for a child that isn't mine, because I'm not a charity. It's not like I have a boatload of money. I'm guessing that guy probably had to struggle at some point just to make sure that, you know, the family is fed and everything, you know, just to make sure that the kid has diapers, that the kid is cared for and all that. And just to find out that, you know, it's not your kid isn't something that can go down well with you, because you've put in so much, you've given up so much, and you've given in so much that it just seems really, really damning to some level. Now, that being said, there actually was another case similar that happened a couple of months ago, where I think it was a Ghanaian or a Nigerian, I'm not sure, some West African guy was trying to get visas to the US for himself and the family. And they had to do a mandatory DNA test for him, the wife, and the 3 kids. And shock on him, he finds out that all 3 kids are not his. All of them. Like, all 3 of those kids. I think the oldest kid was about, 11 or some shit. So this woman has lied to this nigga for like a straight 11 years. Or at least that's as far back as I can think of it. So maybe even 12. So he ends up beating her to the extent where she actually lost 3 teeth. Now, people talked so badly about it, and some people said it was justified. Hell, even I said that it's not right what he did, but it was justified how he reacted, because you can't tell someone how to react when they get angry. You get? So it made sense. So in a more amicable way, I'd rather just kick you out, right? So that was my reasoning behind it. Then I decided to listen to the Mics Are Open podcast. Mad shout out to the Mics Are Open. And one of the hosts, Calvin, actually did mention this whole bit of, if you take up a child from birth, if you start taking care of a baby from the age of 0, going all the way to like 2-3 years, if you are a good father, if you're someone that spent a lot of time with that child, there's a certain connection that you will have with that child. There's a certain bond that you'll have. Are you ready to start killing the bond simply because the child isn't yours? It's not that easy. It would be inhumane. It would be quite heartless for you to just say, you know what, fuck it, I'm done with the kid, and then you ditch all of them and leave. Because there's that bond that you've created. There's that sort of bond that you have with the kid. The kid might not be yours, but the bond is there. So are you ready to punish the kid for something that they didn't do, yet, you can overlook it and just continue moving along? And it did make me rethink everything, because about 2 years ago, I did community service at a baby's home. I took care of those babies for roughly about 10 hours a week for 3 straight months. And I kid you not, once I got done, I actually had grown sort of attached to the babies. I really enjoyed playing with them. And even though they'd puke on me, even though they'd take a dump sometimes, even though sometimes they would annoy me, even though sometimes they would cry endlessly, I had actually grown to love those kids. Now, that being said, like, I knew the kind of bond that was there, and I went back like twice to sort of check up on the babies and all. And unfortunately, as they say, life happens, so I sort of stopped and I didn't go back. Now, to think of the kind of small bond that I had with those babies, and then compare that with a 24/7, okay, not necessarily 24/7, but a much closer bond with a child from a much younger age, all the way up to the level of being together for like 2-3 years, and then you're telling me to ditch? That's a bit hard. Like, that's really, really hard to do. So honestly, after I heard that side of it, it did make me rethink the entire dynamic of whether I would just ditch the girl and the kid and leave. So I was sort of conflicted, but I usually look at it in this sense that, you know what, there's a rise, or at least there's more and more cases of paternity fraud in this day and age. There's shorties that will go and receive pipe time and time again from other niggas, and then get pregnant and then come back to us and then claim that the kid is ours, probably because we'll be much better fathers, or maybe because the other person isn't ready to be the father. And it's unacceptable. It's not a nice thing. We are not charity cases as men. We do not just pick up every single child and take care of them. Adoption exists, but adoption is in a situation whereby you know very well the child isn't yours, but you have chosen to be with the child. In such a case, you aren't given the choice to choose. You are lied to. And it's not a small lie. Small lies is like, baby, do I look fat? No, you don't. It might be a heavy lie, and if the pounds gained aren't too many, then it's still a small lie. It's a little white lie. But you lied to me that the baby is mine? That's humongous. that's affecting an entire life. Hell, it's affecting at least 3 lives at that point. Like, that's a lie that I don't think should be taken for granted, if I can say it that way. This is part of the reason why there's more and more guys that are saying, you know what, the minute I get a kid, I have to do a DNA test. Hell, I was even on Reddit yesterday night, and one of the things that was being recommended was that before you sign the birth certificate of that child and put your name there, you have to go and do a DNA test. You can ask for one to be done, I think, immediately after birth, if I'm not wrong. And I think that one is a little bit more secretive as opposed to trying to do it while, Shorty's pregnant or some shit. And all of this is in an effort to curb the situation that happened with that West African man, because hell, some people don't live in countries where you can manage to do such a thing and exist for much longer. Hell, you might get lynched. At the same time, I don't think there's any one of us that wants to be a part of the statistic of people that were described by Kanye West on that Gold Digger soundtrack. Like, let me even drop you that line over here.
18 years, and on her 18th birthday found out it wasn't his.
I'm not ready to wait for 18 years just to find out that the kid ain't mine. I'd rather find out that the kid ain't mine the minute that kid is born, so that I don't sign the certificate, so that I can save myself from a lot of this shit, and then I can go on. So it's probably a bigger precautionary thing right now to get a DNA test, and I'd sort of put it in the same exact line of things to do as getting a prenup before marriage, because you don't want to end up being tied up for life for some shit that you probably haven't properly read out or haven't really considered properly when you signed on. So yes, it's not something that seems as nice, for a lot of people, but it's something that's becoming incredibly crucial right now, because as my mother said, the only person that knows that the baby is theirs is the mother. And up until you know that shit, then it's very safe to assume that the child isn't yours. Like, that's just it. You'd rather start from there than start from a point of thinking that the child is yours and then realizing that you ended up paying a whole load of bills, you ended up handling a whole load of costs for someone else's kid, and you've pretty much been reduced to a charity case. So honestly, that's some shit that I'm super against. And yes, I know I said I was going to give my verdict on this, so here it is. After a lot of thinking and after a lot of pondering on this shit, I have decided that I would still send her away. And here's my reasoning behind it. In as much as, yes, the connection with the child is there, in as much as I have been with that child for like 3 years straight, I have cared for that child, I have made sure I handled bills, I have struggled, I am not ready to continue holding someone's kid, because I choose to use myself as an example to other men. And since I do not want such a situation, I do not want paternity fraud to continue happening, I want it to reduce, I might as well employ a very harsh consequence as a result of a shorty doing that shit, so that I can prevent more women from doing such. That way, it'll be harder for them to do that. Because look at it like this. The condom has been used a lot nowadays, mainly because niggas do not want to pay child support. Because when you think about it, it's easier to pay for a condom than to pay for child support. It is easier to walk down to the store, hell, even order them online from an online store, than it is to send a child support check. Because we've seen what's happened with a lot of these deadbeat dads. We've seen what's happened to guys that have been left by their babes, or guys who've left their babes and there's a kid involved. Especially if you're in Kenya, you know what FIDA can do to you as a man because of child support. So we're not ready to pay such things. This is because the consequences are a hell of a lot worse than me losing most of my sensation when I'm having sex. It's perfectly okay for me to lose a little bit of that sensation rather than paying a child support check. That's just how we look at it. So if we take that same approach where the consequences are so dire you wouldn't even think of committing the act, if you take that same approach and utilize it in the case of paternity fraud, in the case where there's a mother to a kid who's duped another man into thinking that they're the father. If you start kicking them out straight away and you start sending them away and the stories grow, then there is a likelihood that it'll actually reduce. Hell, shorties will be too scared to pull such a stunt because they'll know very well, if my nigga finds out, then I'm screwed. If my nigga kicks me out, then I'm screwed. If I attempt such an act and he finds out, then I am screwed beyond my wildest dreams. In as much as I want something a little bit more harsh to happen to such women, I think this is something a little bit more befitting. So that way, you can at least reduce on the number of women that are gonna try pulling such shit. And then, you can actually end up becoming the father to your kids and not another nigga's kids. She can't be getting good pipe and then giving you all the responsibilities. Nah, it's not gonna happen like that. That is not how the world works. So if you lay the pipe, then probably you should handle the prize, which is the child, and take responsibility for the child and take care of it. Otherwise, stop having it delegated to another nigga. Anyways, I want to know your thoughts on this. Do you think that you would continue being with a lady? Do you think that you would let them stay and just continue living along with it? Or would you kick them out? The DMs are open. The Instagram handle is @bagakthed. Drop your comments, drop your feedback, drop your thoughts on it. Also, if you have any topics that you would like to drop, that is the same place you can drop them. Also on Facebook, you can hit us up on Break Time on Westside. And on Twitter, you can hit my personal DMs @bagakthed. The B and the D are capital. I will catch you guys on the next break. Take care.